Media Center Ukraine Odessa continues its work, and now we are going to discuss personal income tax distribution for military personnel. Our speaker is Vitaliy Barvinenko, head of Odesa District Council and vice president of the associations on the issues related to interregional and international cooperation. Thank you very much for joining us today. And there is a draft law envisaging exclusion of the personal income tax from local budgets. I know that there was a meeting of the association where you offered your amendments. So the floor is yours. And first of all, I would like to explain what we are discussing here. When the war against our country started, the decisions were made to increase the income of the military because a lot of people were mobilized in the armed forces of Ukraine or joined other law enforcement units. And so the tax was left with the communities. On the other hand, as of beginning of 2022, the situation in several cities is that those enterprises who ensured profit revenue to the budget stopped functioning, like Yuzhny Port factory. So there is no revenue to the budget of that city, and it is was difficult to find a solution to the problems of the city without personal income tax. But other communities received big amounts but cannot spend them. For example, in the Odesa district, there was a record for one community that had 500 million hryvnias in the budget. That was a small community, but the budget they received was disproportional. So there is the issue now, how to solve this issue to ensure both the development of communities and also to make it possible for the state budget to appropriate funds that communities could not earn. Historically, the government wanted to take everything. On the 20th of September, the draft law was voted in the first reading. And so they explained that everything should be taken to the central level. But there was a period between the first reading and the second reading when relevant associations, head of the mayors of the cities, stated that everything should be done to meet interests of the military and also territorial communities, because if all personal income tax would have excluded from the local budgets, the communities would have been unable to ensure their survival, because enterprises do not work anymore, people have left. And I know that the budget committee last week made a decision to send everything to the Verkhovna Rada, so they were not able to support amendments to this draft law. And I discussed this issue with the people's deputies in the Odessa region, and as far as I understand, the plenary session will be continued in the Verkhovna Rada to discuss this draft law. And there is a formula offered. There are numbers for personal income tax as of 2021, not only in Odessa region, but the whole of Ukraine. And if the exclusion of personal income tax leads to the fact that the general revenue is less than in 2021, there should be a reverse rotation, so the central government should compensate that gap. If the amount is more than the revenue that was before 2021, then this money could be taken to the state budget. Yes, this is a manual solution, but at least it will be possible to ensure the balance when it comes to personal income tax and the survival of the territorial communities. because a great number of companies, enterprises have been closed because of the full-scale invasion. And they do not have the personal income tax to form their budgets. I think that if the draft law will be voted with the amendments following the recommendations of people's deputies in the regions and also the recommendation of associations, and it is also offered by fractions like European Solidarity, we will be able to reach the balance, although it will be manual. As for the draft law of 138, this is a legal novelty. When on the 6th of November the law was adopted to take money starting from the 1st of October, I don't know how the Treasury and the Ministry of Finance will deal with that, but this is quite a unique novelty. If we're able to properly distribute personal income tax, then we will see that the compromise will be achieved between the government, associations, and communities. So, can we say that the state also has the right to withdraw these funds? So, when it comes to classical approach in any country, this is a compromise and dialogue between three branches of power. In Ukraine, these are communities, regional level, and the government. I have been waiting. I have voted for the budget for 12 times for 12 years, and I know that any budget is a compromise between communities and central authorities. So yes, we can say that these are public funds, but on the other hand, the aggression stopped activities of a great deal of enterprises. People have left and they don't pay personal income tax. We can see the situation in Yuzhny, in Chornomorsk. Of course, the state should do something about that. So that's why I support this approach to inspect the revenues of 2021 and just to compensate if there is the gap. And now, in 3 months after the exclusion of personal income tax, we see that some communities are not able to pay for heating. Also, it could be a disputable question of compensating this big amount of money. So everything should be properly explained in our condition, and we should also remember about necessity to meet needs of communities. As for procurement, a popular topic, there is Decree 591 is still in force, and as for the first year of the war, I remember it perfectly well. Then there were only 3 or 4 areas where the funds could be spent, but then the government introduced amendments. Then 3 waves of payments for treasury, for example, fuel for the military. Then the second wave for repairs, and the third level is for washing cars. So these amendments have been made by the government. Also, it has not been just discussed publicly. We are not discussing if the government is bad or good, but this is the question of the balance. We have a question from Mikhail. I have several questions. Thank you very much for your perspective. This is a very important problem. As far as I remember, the decision about personal income tax at the level of the draft law was made after the local communities starting announcing tenders to cover their activities, which, as many people believe, are not critical for the country, fighting with the aggressor, which is several times bigger than the country. So I will start with 2 questions. The first one, don't you think that when you offer to leave the level of personal income tax at the level of 2021 is the attempt when it comes to money to live as if the war, the full-scale invasion, has never started, as it was like during the first phase of the war. And how is it possible? Because the war is there. And the second question, could you please comment upon your attitude to the rallies happening in Odessa, Kiev, and other cities of Ukraine? People go to the Odessa Municipal Council, to the Kiev Municipal Council, requiring to stop funding any projects that are not critical for the survival of the communities. As for the second question, and so when it comes to the rallies, my attitude is bad if the rallies during the war have not been agreed by the military administration. As for personal income tax at the level of 2021. So communities spend on roads, facades, spend money from the development budget. So every community used to have development budget, and the procurement process is started. As for personal income tax, if we analyze the situation in every town or city, and this is the normal practice for the budget process, in 2021, personal income tax covered expenditures that were obligatory for communities, like co-funding of healthcare services. The National Healthcare Service is able now to cover only 40% of these medical kit or healthcare kit. At the moment, we have the situation when offline education is has returned. I'm talking about our region in 89% of schools, but today, because of the legislative limitations, we have issues with paying salaries to teachers in several communities and several towns and cities in our region, because these basic issues used to be covered by personal income tax. As for the development budget, we had the practice in March, April 2021, when there was a clear list of codes for which any budget funds could be spent, regulated by Regulation 590. But then some of the balance was violated, and I think that the interest of the several government was involved. And I have been recently surprised by the Rivne region, who wants to build a stadium for 300 million hryvnias for the small town. And when it comes to 2021, personal income tax back then was used only to cover the life activities of the cities and communities. And as for all other procurements, they were covered by the development budget. So I can rephrase the second question. I'm not talking about if the rally is allowed. I'm not sure that we have such permissions, but we have them. But I'm talking about the requirements of people. I'm not talking about the mere fact of a rally. I'm talking about requirements of people. Yes, these are two different things, requirements and the form. As for the form, so there are some prohibitions, and this is up for the regional military administration to allow such meetings or rallies. As for the people's demands, it is absolutely normal when people residing in any community believe that there is improper use of funds. I'm a professional person. I believe that I'm the one. I have one question. Why no protestant addressed the administrative court to terminate the decision of a session of the municipal council? So we've discussed that with the deputies, with the people's deputies. And I asked about the claim. Will it be able to freeze the implementation process? Yes. And I've heard that in my experience, if there was a court, some court proceeding, as the head of Rayon district, I was not even able to sign a document. And so there are different proceedings that could freeze this question. Katerina Nazhevnikova is not here, who is more aware of the process. But I think the situation is that even there is a claim submitted to the administrative court de jure, the municipal council will continue performing its duties. And many people believe, and you are an experienced person in the Odessa regional police, and you understand that several hundred of people gather every week with their demands, not to fund which is not that critical during the war. What do you think about this? What do you think about demands of hundreds of people, which is quite a big number for Odessa? There are like two parts, two levels here. When it comes to court decisions, there is the range of the people's deputies in the municipal council that just have speeches during the session. They know what they can do, but they don't do that because they want to trade these possibilities. As for the people with their demands, I believe that this is quite a significant factor or precedent when there is a simple idea of fair use of budget funds unites people. Before that, we used to have rallies for some political or theoretical issues, but here, in this case, people have clear demands to use budget funds to support our armed forces, and I'm okay about that. So I don't say that they are wrong in their demands. People have their position. People, they have their opinion. But for me, it is very important if such rally is allowed or not, because it is important for my personal analysis. So then the activities of the people's deputies, those people who have been selected to represent interests of territorial communities, and their activities do not cover the voting only. They control the procedure because these people are aware about the procedure. They should monitor that. And also they have some functions. So they have rights and obligations. And when it comes to their functions, within these processes, the people's deputies and members of municipal council, they don't use their tools. But as for demands, I'm quite okay about them. So there is the questions about the court in question because their procurement procedure has been initiated. And I understand the logics about returning part of personal income tax to the local level. But what is the guarantee that this money is not spent for drums, for road repairs, for stadiums, or for something else? How we can guarantee that the local authorities will not spend this money for that? That will lead to the situation that has led to the draft law on centralizing these budget funds. There is only one guarantee in final provisions that clearly regulate such refund or reverse grant. I would like to explain how the process is organized when it comes to subsidies or grants. We have the list of communities all over Ukraine. Every day, we receive money of the revenue and expenditures. And when it comes to reverse subsidy, this money were not just provided to a community. These money were provided for specific programs. In cases when communities could not implement these programs by themselves because of the lack of money. It's just that this money were provided by through the reverse grant to build or to construct stadiums, repairs, etc. There was a social economic development, some allocated funds that were provided through reverse grant or subsidy. And this is a political issue. We do not, it is not, it is a technical issue. And there is a standard procedure envisaged. I think that it has been developed by the Ministry of Finance. And when is the draft law, when this draft law planned, if I'm not mistaken, this week they are going to finalize all amendments to submit it to voting. How do you believe if such amendments are not accepted? How can it affect communities, including Odessa region? So first, they will use the funds that they still have. Then mayors, heads of communities will just fire. I've discussed that issue with the respective people, heads of communities, who say that in such a situation it is better to leave, not to face the catastrophe in the local systems. As for dismissal, then we will have administrative consequences. But what about economic impact? If communities don't have money to cover their basic needs, they cannot get loans. They are not allowed to do that. They will just ask the government to provide this money, and the government will use this emergency fund trying to cover these gaps. So the situation actually is very clear. So the governmental special fund will provide money manually to loyal heads of communities. That tactics was used by Kuchma's government. But the government has a special fund for 20+ billions for emergency situations. For example, if there is no heating in a town or a city, this is an emergency situation. And I'm looking at the budget as the complex document. This is the economic constitution of Ukraine as of 2024, envisaging funding agricultural sector, embassies, consulates, etc., and also response to emergency situations, actually several times this emergency fund has been increased already this year. So, for example, if there is an issue of not being able to pay salary for 3 months, you as the head of community should go to the government, to the prime minister, just to show their loyalty and get money. That's how I see it. Maybe I'm too cynical, but you're describing the budget processes established during Kuchman's Yanukovych's time. Don't you think that this money, this personal income tax, could be sent for military needs? The president has signed a law that, if I'm not mistaken, 21% of GDP should be spent for defense component, including the army, police, etc. Don't you think that this money should be allocated by communities themselves, taken into consideration Decree 590? The thing is that if we analyze local authorities according to the budget, there could be territorial defense unit, or they can provide subvention to the relevant military unit. The problem is that when 3-4 months ago, the heads of big military units located on the territory of our regions to discuss the topic, the question was to those people that money was allocated, and this is up to them. These commanders should decide what to buy using this money. But if they are not able to make their decisions, these issues should be brought to the level of the Ministry of Defense. So it's so on one hand, the community allocates funds to a unit, but on the other hand, we can see that sometimes this money is spent to build a road to a military unit. The law envisaged two options for local authorities: either territorial defense units, we have 2 territorial brigades in Odessa, or money could be provided to a military unit. But this is not the issue now. So there is a general issue now about the format of the withdrawal of personal income tax, how it will be compensated for communities, and how to ensure proper functioning of communities. And I think we understand that after the first reading, generally this has been accepted. So they actually did not expect that it would be so complicated, but the budget committee has been fully affiliated with the central level. But for the first time over the last 3 years, it was impossible to make a quick decision, despite some officials were present there. And now they have submitted to the discussion of the Verkhovna Rada. So all the amendments recommended by the association will be considered by the MPs. There are 2 types of amendments. The formats, like for example, the budget committee takes into consideration an amendment to provide personal income tax for some need. Any MP can submit it for recognition. For MPs to support it. If they are not able to vote and more than 300 votes are needed, then the amendment is not taken into consideration. I think that everything has been already agreed. It is very difficult to get 226 votes. So everything is under discussion and everything is agreed. And I think that they have time out for this week to develop a complex position. And so the topic that they discussing now is to compensate the withdrawal of the personal income tax. Have you discussed this issue with communities? Do you have any alternative solutions? Every day I communicate with representatives of communities from all over Ukraine, not only from the Odessa region. And the vision of communities is really very clear. They all have a survival budget, so to say, it up to 2024. They know how they can use it. And only Odesa District has 120,000 IDPs. I don't like the word, but these are Ukrainian citizens that are now residing in our area. This is our compatriots. So IDP is a kind of a cliché. So these are Ukrainian citizens that are vulnerable because of the attack of our enemy. And they just relocate to other areas of our country, their homeland. Just a year ago, I visited a European forum where I communicated with the heads of communities from Poland to the Czech Republic. And back then, they told me that our war affected their self-governance system. For example, a school in Poland. in Lublin or some other city. The school has been constructed, and they have some expectations of the number of students at school in 2023. But now, because of Ukrainian children, their schools need to work in 2 shifts. And that's why not only Ukraine, but those countries are also affected by war in our country, because they have certain expectations for the development of their communities when it comes to schools, hospitals, and other social infrastructure facilities. So communities have only one expectation for the central government to communicate with them, to discuss autumn and winter periods and their actual functioning after that. The compensation of 4% has not been voted for yet, and if it is not approved, then no centralized heating will be organized. Do communities trying to find international investors? So perhaps they should be proactive, not to wait some support of the government. When it comes the foreign aid programs, investors are ready to invest and return and wait for the return on investment. The budget expenditures cannot be covered by any entity, even by Ukrainian companies, because otherwise it will be considered as corruption. Only revenues and taxes could be used to cover official expenditures of community. If foreign investors solves the issue of paying salaries, then it is a possibility for corruption. And just the intervention from Mikhailo. It is not only about salaries. Trolley buses were bought using the funds from EBRD. And in Odessa, there were negotiations with foreign investors and organizations. As far as I understand, Yevgen is asking about this. We are not talking about USAID paying salary to Odessa workers. When it comes to mutual assistance between different enterprises from Odessa, Kiev, and other regions, and the cities abroad, then this is a different type of cooperation. And this is the cooperation between utility companies. For example, they can get boiler rooms, generators, and they can use them. Thank you very much, Vitaliy, for being with us today. We will continue at 2 p.m.